Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair for coming out again for our Ramadan program here at Sahaba Initiative, where weekly we talk about different issues related to the community, mental health, community development, organizing, and really just being servants within our community. Just a brief background about Sahaba Initiative before I get started. As many of you know, we're a millennial-led organization that started about 10 years ago in order to serve the most impoverished people within our community. The people that we serve are primarily in the San Bernardino County area, which is one of the largest, poorest counties in the United States. We provide food, mental health counseling, financial assistance, and all the things that families really need at this time. Inshallah, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with Sister Hosai Mojaddidi, which all of you know is very well known in the field of mental health, spirituality, and really helping people become whole again. And without further ado, Sister Hosai Mojaddidi.
جزاكم الله خيرا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers and sisters, mashallah, I wanted to first thank Brother Arbaz and the Sahaba Initiative for inviting me to be here. It's a great honor. I spoke at the Sahaba Initiative a while ago, actually several years ago. I think I still lived in Southern California, so it was a very pleasant surprise to hear from this wonderful organization and to see all the accomplishments that have been made over the years. So, alhamdulillah, thank you again for inviting me. And this topic is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So that's why I agreed as soon as I got the invitation, because I really do think there's so much healing that it offers for people if they've never heard of emotional intelligence or not familiar with it. Once I think they realize its power and how much it offers, they are so thirsty for more. I get questions all the time about where can I get resources, can you point me to this direction, that direction. So I really love talking about this particular topic, alhamdulillah. So I actually have some notes, or it's like just a quick file really on Google Drive here, but I think it gives a nice sort of summary, and you can have a visual as I speak about emotional intelligence. Let me go ahead and screen share. If you give me just a moment, bismillah. Hopefully this will work easily. And I'm going to try to do this way. So can you see my screen? I'm clicking on it, but I'm not sure because it seems like it's frozen. Can you see what I'm seeing right now? Which is a file on, it says emotional intelligence. Maybe in the comments section if someone can let me know. Oh, you can't see it yet? Huh, okay. Oh, wait, there we go. I'm sorry, my bad. Now I got it. All right, now hopefully you should be able to see this. Let me try to expand this window. Whoa, wrong button. Apologize. 1 second. Okay, can you see it now? And now I've lost my view of the camera, so I have no idea if you guys can see me. But let me actually close out of here. Sorry. I'm not, there we go. Okay. Let me just close it up for just a second. Where did it go? Sorry, guys. I thought this would be a lot smoother. Oh, subhanAllah. Did it stop? Oh, it stopped. No, it didn't stop. Okay. Let me stop it and do it again. My browser disappeared. There we go. What? Oh, completely lost my browser. Okay. Give me just a minute, inshallah. I really don't know what happened. I think I slid it to the next screen. These, there's so much. I have this trackpad that's new and it's very sensitive. So, the slightest movement and all of a sudden everything you've done is gone. So, okay. Got a little, there we go, bismillah. So now let's try the screen share one more time. Inshallah, you should be able to see it, and I won't fully expand it. I'll just let you see what I see. Okay, so can you see this screen? Yes, inshallah. Okay, perfect. Khalas. So let's go ahead and begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm just going to leave it open like this. I hope it's enough. I just want you to at least be able to read along with me. So this topic of emotional intelligence, let's first describe what it is. Okay, it's a framework, and it was popularized in 1995 by a leading expert. His name is Daniel Goleman, and he basically took the workings of other, I think they're psychologists or people in the field who coined the term in 1990, and he took this term and then he wrote an entire book called Emotional Intelligence. I have it here somewhere, but if I need to, I'll grab it in a moment. So this book is awesome because what he's done is he's outlined basically why is this form of intelligence referred to as emotional intelligence more important than just the way that we measured intelligence before. IQ, right? Cognitive abilities, reasoning skills. Those are the ways that typically we assumed people's intelligence based on those numbers or metrics. But now there's this completely different framework that actually teaches that there's a superior form of intelligence. It's called emotional intelligence. And so what he's done is he's outlined 5 key qualities. So when I read his material, I just thought it was amazing because I saw so many parallels. Everything that I was reading seemed very much in line with our tradition as Muslims. And so that's what this document that's in front of you is. It really is just a sort of a way of bringing all of it together so that we understand how emotional intelligence is actually really reflected in the prophetic example. If you study the life of the Prophet ﷺ, if you know his seerah, if you know anything about how he was, his characteristics, his qualities, all of the beautiful virtues that he had, then you will naturally already know a lot about emotional intelligence. But what we've done is kind of organized all of that for you using the 5 qualities outlined by Daniel Goleman and then paralleling them with principles of our own tradition. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The very first quality that he defines is self-awareness. And again, based on what framework you're looking at or lens you're looking at that term with, you'll see something different. Or I mean, it's similar, but self-awareness could mean so many different things depending on the person, right? And so for a Muslim, what self-awareness is, we refer to this very popular maxim often attributed to Ibn Arabi. Some people do say it is a hadith, but it's kind of vague, whether or not it's a quote from Ibn Arabi or otherwise. But it's still very popular and very used, and that is "Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu," which basically means that the one who knows him or herself will know their Lord or knows their Lord. So this idea of self-awareness is really about getting in touch with oneself and all of the unique qualities that one has. So from a again Islamic perspective, we want to start off with, first of all, why are we here, right? How did we come here? Well, alhamdulillah, our deen answers that question through our understanding of aqidah or creed. We understand that there is a purpose to existence, right? Allah created us to worship him. And so right there we have some concept of who we are. We are created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that foundation, right, of your faith informs you of your purpose. And so that right there gives you a glimpse of who you are. You're a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So studying creed is so important because that's just one small aspect of it. But if you further your studies into aqidah, it will give you even more insight about who you are, what's expected of you, your relationship with Allah, who is Allah. All of those questions are answered in the study of aqidah, right? Which again informs you and kind of falls under this umbrella term of self-awareness. And then we have knowing our responsibilities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And his creation. So this is where Sharia and fiqh come, and we can look to the laws within the tenets of our faith, the laws within our faith that inform us how we are to conduct ourselves. So we get a sort of understanding, a definition of who we are, why we're here, and now we have more information about exactly how we're supposed to function, what we're supposed to do, what the boundaries are. And all of that is informed to us by the Sharia and fiqh. And then the next aspect would be to self-awareness would be to know your temperament, your what we refer to as mizaj, right? This tells you your personality type. Everybody's different. There are people who are very mild-mannered, soft-spoken people. There's other people who are very boisterous and gregarious and outgoing. You have people who are very analytical and cerebral and thoughtful, and then you have people who are very emotional, right? And so all of that is explained to you when you study personality typing, and especially under, again, Islam, we have the science of the four temperaments, which would explain mizaj, right? And then also your unique strengths, weaknesses, talents, all of those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed every single person with. Everybody has a range of different abilities that are, again, acquired, the whole nature versus nurture, right? Some things we naturally inherit because of, our parents, possibly. Other things we learn based on the environment around us, but everybody has those things. So just being very attuned with oneself in that regard. And then self knowledge is also about expressing oneself emotionally and having and we're going to get to that hopefully towards the end, about emotional literacy and being able to verbalize, right, to actually understand one's emotional states, but then also articulate them effectively to other people. That's also part of the process of self-awareness, because for example, just to use a more modern framework again that explains that, one of my favorite tools that I often tell people to look into, just because I think it really does help with any relationship, especially the more personal relationships, marriage, even within the household, between siblings, family. Whenever we're in close quarters with one another, there's certain things that we should just naturally know about one another, but sometimes hard to read people. This particular toolkit does help, and that's called the 5 love languages, right? The 5 love languages, and you can look that up. But what it does is it offers, again, a way for people to define better how they receive love and how they give love. A lot of people are walking around and they don't know that about themselves, and it becomes difficult to express their feelings or to express their needs and their wants in their relationships, because they haven't done the work, that inner work, to really know what those things are that they need. And so then that can obviously impact their relationships, right? So this is what would fall under this first term of emotional intelligence, of just being really self-aware. You have all of these things down, and as you can tell, this is a commitment. It's going to require work, that we actually put in the hard work to know what this all of these things are. You have to study, you have to read, you have to pursue knowledge, and acquire knowledge, and then also you have to, again, look inwardly to yourself to pick up on all of these different unique things and aspects about your own personality, and pay attention to those things so that you can be more effective when you are interacting with other people, whether again it's in your home or whether it's at work or in the community, in other places. So all of this is why emotional intelligence is so key, because it does impact every area of one's life once you again become very well acquainted with it. So that's the first quality of self-awareness. Let's go ahead and look at the next quality. Here we have self-regulation. So once you have all of those things down, where you've really paid attention to kind of coming to understand yourself better, now you have to realize that there are those strengths and shortcomings that we talked about earlier, that they're going to test you, right? And that's part of, again, what we've learned when we study Aqidah, that we are here to worship Allah, but we also are going to be tested, and we have an enemy who's going to work against us, and then we also have our own inner sort of force that works against us as well, the nafs. And so self-regulation really teaches you, from the Islamic perspective, taskiyat an-nafs, which is how to, again, control oneself. So you know yourself, but now you need to make sure that you can, you have the willpower, you have the strength, you understand what your boundaries are, and you know how to rein your lower self in. And so Alhamdulillah, we have again this wonderful science of tazkiyat and nafs, and under that you learn the diseases of the heart, right? So purification of the heart, madharat al-qulub. For those who don't know, I'm right now, for example, teaching a youth class on this particular subject. I really encourage us to start early. Unfortunately, so many of us may not be familiar with these things. Even myself, I came to understand a lot of this as an adult, and that's just, life circumstances. Many of us, Allah guides when He wills, but for me and many people that I know, it came later on in adulthood. But in an ideal situation, we would be teaching younger children these principles so that it helps them, right? So you have an adolescent, for example, as they're learning, to, again, pushing boundaries, they're emerging from childhood, entering adulthood. There's a range of emotions and physiological changes, emotional changes, mental changes that are happening to them. And part of their journey would be facilitated by giving them this spiritual tool of, learn about the diseases of the heart, learn about what the diseases are that can plague you, and then how to overcome them. Right? It's not just a matter of learning them, it's actually a matter of training the nafs, so that you can see where your particular shortcomings are and what potential pitfalls there are ahead for you spiritually, so that you can avoid them. That's why it's such a powerful, again, science to study. So and that obviously will teach you, again, to practice restraint, abstinence, which is so key, because as we know, raging hormones, right, especially for that young demographic, that's what they're up against. There's so many sudden changes to them. But again, alhamdulillah, when you study our tradition the way it should be studied, it does offer a lot of help to process all those changes and to understand them from a spiritual lens. And so willpower, all of those things are inculcated by the study of this. And we understand that this concept of mujahada nafs, right, the struggle against one's lower self, is a lifelong battle that we're in it until we leave this earth. We will always be struggling against our lower self, and to make a commitment to working on that. Now, it's not just a subject that you read or you study and then you graduate from and you're done. No, it's something that you carry with you every single day, because you will be tested, right? We're emotional creatures. And so if we're not familiar with, again, what emotions we individually have that we need to regulate, then those emotions can overcome us, which is why studying this is so important. We learn, for example, how to control our anger. Right, the Prophet ﷺ taught us, la taghdab, right? Do not become angry. And the scholars have interpreted that hadith as not, don't be angry, because there's naturally going to be things that anger us in the world, and anger is a human emotion, just as sadness and happiness and joy are. However, we have to understand how to control the anger so that it doesn't lord over us. So what the hadith is actually saying is, do not become anger, right? Where all you see is anger, and all of your rational, impulses just go out the door. Your rational mind is no longer working because you're just completely reactive. That is what's dangerous, and we see the proof of that. We see the evidence of that every single day. How many horrible things have happened on earth because individuals have not been able to rein in their emotions, right? So that's why this is so critical for us to understand. And then, la darara wala dirar, do not cause harm or be harmed. This is very important that we understand that hadith, right? That it's really talking about emotional regulation. And all of these wisdoms are given to us in our deen. And so when we look again at self-regulation, it really is about empowerment. It's about giving people the framework with which to understand the range of human emotions, but also to remind them or us about our purpose, right? We have a purpose to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to remember He witnesses over us everything. Nothing is lost in His knowledge. He hears, He sees it all. And so that presence, that level of taqwa is just naturally inculcated when you are paying attention to, again, this particular study, and you're committed to it. You become more aware of God's presence over you, and that naturally will help you to rein in your emotions, inshallah. So very important part of this, framework of emotional intelligence. So the third part here is motivation. So again, going back to our purpose, right? We know, as I've stated before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, He said that He's created mankind and jinn to worship Him, right? This has been revealed to us. And so this purpose in and of itself is, everything, because it gives us, the overall sort of reason why we're here. But then within that, we also find motivation every single day to exist in the best way possible, because we've been given and blessed with the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Having his seerah with such detail and knowing such intimate details about the way that he conducted himself, the way that he did pretty much everything. I mean, from the way he woke up, the way he walked, the way he ate, the way he spoke to people. We have an incredible amount of detail, but what that does is it gives us, again, something to align ourselves with, that gives us a sense of purpose, that we're reminding ourselves every day of the greater purpose with which we were created, and that we're motivated by following the example of the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's facilitated for us, right? If we were just left to our own devices trying to figure out how to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that would be really challenging, because everybody would have possibly their own idea of how to do that, right? But here, alhamdulillah, we have the Prophet's example. So just following his example is such a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we have that. And that is what should give us, again, that motivation, where we wake up every single day knowing that this world was created for us to partake in it. We should enjoy it, and we should be responsible citizens on earth. We should wish well for people and spread good and spread spread light. But how do we do that? We look to his example. So that's where, alhamdulillah, you find that just, again, motivating factor. Such a big part of, again, someone who's emotionally intelligent. They know what their purpose is every single day, and they're not bogged down with that feeling, because many people are. There's a lot of people who really don't know what they're supposed to be doing, and then they get sucked into so many other things, because maybe they possibly don't have someone building them up and reminding them of their purpose. And here, alhamdulillah, we have that. By virtue of being Muslim, we are told, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that he created us to be representatives on earth. He gave us that amazing position of authority, of leadership. Every believer has that. And so that in and of itself is such a motivating factor. But a lot of people who don't have faith, they don't have that sense of purpose. Why am I here? What am I doing here? Where am I going? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges us in the Quran to think about these things. Why are you here? Where are you going? Right? So alhamdulillah, that is where, again, we're so motivated, alhamdulillah, on every day, right? So we see the fourth and then I'm sorry, also just on motivation, I don't want to skip that part because it's important. We also learn the virtue of intentionality, right? We have to have intention with everything that we do, and that even if we don't necessarily get to accomplish everything that maybe we set out to do, the fact that, alhamdulillah, we have this faith that tells us that God judges us according to our intention, and that is greater, is such a validating thing, right? Because there are so many people who wish to do a lot. We wish we could accomplish more, maybe because of life circumstances. There's people who have health issues. There's people who have responsibilities. They're caretakers to family members. They have young children or elderly parents. They have to work full time, but they wish that they could go study abroad, or go help this relief effort or that relief effort, or study the book of Allah, and teach the book of Allah. There's a lot of people who wish they could do certain things, but because of their, specific circumstances, they can't. And here, alhamdulillah, again, we're taught that just by having the intention, subhanallah, of good works, Allah is so generous that He will give you the reward of that anyway, even if you're not able to do whatever you set out to do. Just have the good intention of it. For example, I read once, and I loved it. It just was such a beautiful hadith. But it said that anyone who intends to become a hafidh of Quran, right? If you have that intention and you start to work towards it, let's say memorize, here and there, you've done Juzama and you're kind of, doing the more well-known sort of surahs, but you're working at it, you're working at it, you're working at it. And let's say, you go your whole life and you may not have accomplished half of the Quran even, or a third of it. But subhanAllah, because you put that effort in, that intention was there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise you amongst the Hufaz. That's so beautiful to think of that. So intention is such a big part of the believer, right? That we wake up every day, we have that sense of purpose, and we do everything, what? Bismillah, right? In the name of Allah, invoking the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because His pleasure is the ultimate goal every day. So that level, again, of intentionality is so key to that, for that part of emotional intelligence, which we understand as motivation. We have a lot of high motivation in our faith, alhamdulillah. So the fourth quality of emotional intelligence is empathy. And, subhanAllah, there's so much to say about this. I feel like every time I do this section that I wish I had more time, because the entire life of the Prophet ﷺ teaches us about empathy. When you study his seerah and you read that even as an infant, nursing infant or baby, he would refuse to feed from Halima Sadiya until the other babies that she was also nursing fed first. He was always thinking of the other, even in that stage, subhanAllah. And so many stories from his young childhood and even into before he became the Prophet ﷺ, indicate for us that he was very consumed with pleasing and looking after other people before himself. And of course, that continued up until his very last moments. That was just his nature. And so everything that we learn from his seerah, how he dealt with people of all different ranges and ages and backgrounds, socioeconomic background, status, it didn't matter. He was very empathic. He was able to make everybody feel special, feel seen, feel heard, children, women, everybody felt important because the Prophet ﷺ had that ability to feel what they were feeling and to connect with them. And so even animals, subhanAllah, how many stories do we have of him actually empathizing and, fighting for the rights of animals, subhanAllah. The story of the bird and the story of the camel, so many beautiful stories. But all of that teach us the importance of empathy. And that we have to really, look around the world and we see, there's just so much darkness in our world. And in my estimation, it's because we've lost this focus of thinking of other people, and we've become very self-centered, and individualism is a very popular sort of way that people live. It's all about me, you do you. We hear these terms all the time. What do they mean? It really means just live for your own whims and desires and don't care about other people. So it's like the opposite message of everything that our Prophet ﷺ taught us. So empathy is really about looking beyond yourself and thinking of the other. And it's important to know the term, because a lot of times people will confuse empathy with sympathy. So empathy is, when you're feeling, as we say, in emotion with another person, right? Sympathy is you're just observing their state. You're with them. So if you see someone, for example, sad, right, and you feel sympathy, you're kind of like, oh, sorry that you feel that way. That's sympathy. You're extending. It's a good quality, mashallah, to be sympathetic, of course. But empathy is a degree above it, because it's not just that you're observing someone in that state. You're actually feeling what they're feeling. So you may reach out to them, and if they're sad, you feel sad as well. It's affecting you too. If they cry, you're crying with them. It's like, it's not just something that you're observing. So it's very important to understand the distinction there, because a lot of times people think that they're being empathic when it's really sympathy. And again, sympathy is a good thing, but if we want to align ourselves with the Prophet ﷺ's way, we want to be more empathic, right? So very important to understand. And then of course this hadith, right? لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. Very important to understand this hadith, because this is really about putting your brother or sister before yourself, to remove the importance of the self, because the nafs is very indulgent, right? The nafs is weak. It's always looking out for itself, always. That's why we, even when we're alone and there's no one else there, we shortchange ourselves, right? It's sad but true. How many people have had a lot of opportunity? Let's just look at this quarantine time. How many of us have had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good because we have much more time than we've had before, but we've squandered that time. We could have maybe memorized, we could have maybe learned a new skill, we could have maybe, really done a lot of good, even under this pandemic. I know it seems like, oh, all the opportunities were shut on us, but that was opportunities for, leisurely activities, going to the mall, eating at this restaurant, grabbing a coffee. Yeah, those things were kind of, taken away, but there's so much that we could have done, or we could still be doing, I should say, when it comes to outreach, when it comes to knowledge acquisition, like really be bettering ourselves, right? So all of that. But how many of us did that versus how many people took this time? And again, it's, we're all at different levels, so we should put that out there. But just to show you the nature of the nafs, right? Because the nafs is so indulging, it doesn't think on that level. It thinks about comfort. It thinks about food. It thinks about sleep. It thinks about entertainment. So the nafs, once it's gets an opportunity like this to just stay home in your pajamas all day, it's gonna be pushing you, instead of picking up and reading a book and learning. It's gonna push you to just get on the computer or get on the Netflix and binge watch a bunch of shows that in and out. That's what a lot of these shows are. They really don't have a lot of lasting impact. If you're really being honest, how many of us have recall of the shows that we've binged, right? We might remember a few details about it, but we can't recall episode after episode, right? But that's just, the nature of the nafs. It's very indulgent to entertainment and things like that. So to show you, right, that we oftentimes shortchange ourselves. So to start to focus on not indulging the nafs is such a big part of this process of empathy, because it's never really benefiting you. The nafs is always taking you away from good. It's taking you away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's taking you away from the service of other people, which there is so much reward for, right? That's what the nafs does. And so once you start to not give it so much importance and you prefer other people, you will see the benefit of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will start to, again, just increase you and in your understanding and in your just experience. Your worship will become better. A lot of things will just start to improve, because the focus is no longer on feeding this insatiable appetite, or several appetites that are clustered under the nafs, right? So, that's the fourth quality of emotional intelligence. The last one is social skills, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He created us into nations and tribes so that we may know one another, right? And that's really key in understanding the importance of social skills. It's key because we should be, extending as Muslims, as I referenced earlier, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with a purpose, but He also created us as a representative on earth, and that leadership quality that we all should own. We should come into that leadership is so important, because it's necessary. It's necessary for people to learn about this deen, that we are able to speak out, we are able to be comfortable in social settings. And so social skills is a big part of our faith, and that's why when you see the Prophet ﷺ, so much of his interactions with people, he's teaching us these subtleties of how to reach people in their, by the way you speak to them, by the way that you receive them, by the way that you extend empathy, right? All of those previous things that we've talked about are definitely, used even, in our social skills. For example, the story of the man who urinated in the masjid, right? Everybody was so reactive when he did that. But why was it that the Prophet ﷺ was just cool, mashallah, as a cucumber, as they say, just totally relaxed? It's because he understood that this person is, he saw him for where he was at. He was inebriated. He wasn't in his right mind. He didn't know maybe what he was doing. And so instead of just letting your emotions get the best of you, he used that, opportunity to veil him, right? He allowed him to finish. He told the Sahaba to veil him. And then after he was done, then he spoke with him, and the impact of the way he reached him and the mercy and all of that was just such a beautiful transformative experience for that man. But how many other hadith do we know of stories like that where people were so moved to faith because of the way the Prophet ﷺ reached them? We can all learn from his example if we study his example. And I'll give you just a quick sort of story from my past. So when I learned about something that my teacher had taught us about how the Prophet ﷺ, when he would go to the different tribes, as he was doing his dawah, and he had again the emotional intelligence. There's nobody more emotionally intelligent than the Prophet ﷺ. He had it long before it became something, in the 1990s. He defined it. But when he would go around and he would talk to people from different tribes, he would pick up the different accents and the annotations that they would have in Arabic, and he would speak to them in that language, or in that dialect, right? In their dialect, he would speak to them in their dialect. So and that would obviously make them feel so special, right? Like, wow, he's not from this particular village or tribe, but yet he knows our way of talking that's different than his tribe, right? So that is one just simple example of having really strong social skills. So I remember when I read, or when our teacher taught us that, I was so impressed by that, because naturally I'm a polyglot, I guess you could. I love languages. I like to study languages. Alhamdulillah, I speak a few different languages, but I really appreciate language because I think it's such a incredible thing if you think about it. And so when I was younger, I remember having friends who were from different backgrounds, and I like to just kind of learn different phrases, that they that were different, because you can always go into a quick Google search on any language and get the common phrases like "Hi, how are you?" "I am well," or "My name is," which is great to do too. But I like to kind of change it up a little bit. So I would like to learn things that are really out there that nobody would normally maybe go to study that particular phrase, but it might make it seem as though you were a fluent speaker. And so I had a good friend, she was Filipina, and I asked her to teach me some words in Tagalog. And so I just learned a couple of phrases, but every time I would meet like a Filipina or a Filipino person and I would get comfortable with them, sometimes, working in retail or whatever job I was doing, I would just like to make people feel comfortable. So I would, salamat, just thank you. And you would, kind of make them feel, oh, like you know how to do that. And then I would increase it and I would say other phrases. So one of the phrases she taught me was, O talaga hindi ko alam. Okay, I've 20 years later, 20 plus years later, I'll never forget this phrase because it's just stuck in my head. But all it means is, oh, I didn't know that. And so whenever I would hear people speaking Tagalog, I would just kind of, make myself like near them, and then I would throw that into the sentence as if I was listening and part of the conversation. And it would always shock them because they were like, what, you speak Tagalog? How could we never knew. And then it would be a nice icebreaker, and I would tell them that's actually pretty much all I know, or I would say maybe one or two other things that I knew. But subhanallah, immediately it would bring them in ease. It would make them feel comfortable around me. And that, where did I learn that from? It's a social skill that I learned from the Prophet's example, subhanAllah. So that's why these, qualities that we, are learning about, really, they all point back to him. Every single thing that I've shared today talks about his example. And I've learned, that's why we put this presentation together, because you can certainly do the search on emotional intelligence and further your understanding of it as, a framework that psychologists and educators have put together. Or you can look to the Prophet's example and just naturally have all of these skills down, right? But I think making the parallels is really helpful for people. So that's why I hope, inshallah, this presentation was helpful to you. Just one last point, because we wanted to leave some time for question and answers, and I just noticed the time. But I did want to say, because I mentioned it earlier, so when we talked about self-awareness, and I said that part of it is about emotional literacy, or being very well versed in how to define or express your emotions. This would fall under emotional literacy. This is also a really helpful tool. This is called Plutchik's Wheel of Emotion. I don't have his name, or actually, do I have his name here somewhere? Yeah, well, his name is right here, Plutchik. So that's how it's spelled. If you look at this, it's just a really great, again, little diagram that shows the 8 primary emotions that human beings have that this psychologist Plutchik has defined for us. And then he's given us also a range of how these emotions are expressed, right? If they are intensely expressed or just, maybe a little bit, less intense, that range is also explained here. So, for example, anger, right? When we see, where am I? Here, anger. So anger is the intense form, or I'm sorry, is the manifestation, right, of this of an emotion we're all familiar with. But when it's intensely manifested, it's rage, right? So the more inward you go into the circle, into the diagram, the more intense the emotions are. And then when it's not as intense, it's annoyance. And those of us, again, who may, because of this quarantine, tensions are really high in a lot of homes. I think we've probably felt a little bit of each of these emotions at some point, right? But it's important, again, to know the difference between all of these emotions and how they come out and what the triggers are. This is what self-awareness does, is it teaches you to be in touch with your emotions, and then to have the words to be properly express it. And so imagine how much healthier our relationships would be if we taught children something like Plutchik's Wheel of Emotion, and helped them better define their emotions, instead of just relying on 2 or 3 descriptive words like I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm happy. That's pretty much most of our vocabulary is so limited when it comes to our emotions. But there's just so much with human emotions that really does help to, again, better express to another person what you're feeling, and also reduce miscommunication, reduce fighting, reduce a lot of that hostility that naturally occurs when things aren't communicated correctly. So this is the type of, again, information that would fall under becoming a self-aware person. But I always say, like, just imagine if we were all taught this at a younger age, and we were working on ourselves and refining ourselves throughout that adolescent period, so that when we emerge into full adulthood, into our 20s, and we're taking on the world and starting our career paths and looking to relationships, how much healthier, more balanced we all would be had we done this work all those years along. And unfortunately, like I said, it's not something that I was ever exposed to until adulthood. And alhamdulillah, better late than never. But I do think that we have to introduce these things earlier, because that is our tradition. Our tradition teaches these things at an early age. We don't wait for. That's why children who are in adolescence, or when they reach adolescence, we consider them as adults, because they do have the ability to reason and to think and to process this type of stuff. So I think we just need to. That might be for another conversation, but to reassess when to introduce these things to. I think the earlier the better, because we would all probably, it would spare so many of us of heartache and miscommunications and a lot of things. So this just is, again, a summary of emotional intelligence. There's so much more to this incredible science. I invite you to look it up. Check out Daniel Goleman. His book is literally called Emotional Intelligence. There's a title there, I can't remember it, but just look it up, you'll find it. And I think we can stop here and let, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take your questions, inshallah. Okay, so, and live comments. Okay, you can all hear, right? Tell me I haven't been talking to myself this whole time. Inshallah not. All right. Okay, alhamdulillah. Thank you, brother. So are there any other questions or comments about emotional intelligence that you guys would like to know about? So I'm not on Facebook. I can't see any questions. I'm just waiting for Brother Arbaz, or? Oh, okay. Thank you. So I do see a comment here about the youth program. Yes. So through the MCC East Bay, which is the masjid where I teach at. It's here up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. We have a Facebook group where all of the classes are. The recordings are posted on Facebook as well as on their YouTube page, but the actual sessions you can still sign up for it. We've had 3 sessions. We have 3 remaining. So if you want to bring yourself up to speed, you can watch the recordings and then sign up through the MCC East Bay website. Even just do MCC East Bay. You can look up their website, their Facebook page, and you'll see the it's just a simple, I think, form that you can register, and then they'll send you the link. So inshallah, you can find more information. Okay. Yes, and it is online based. So the question I have, it's for youth, so from 10 all the way to 18, anywhere in that range. And if you have a younger child who's mature enough, my 8-year-old is in the class. He really wants to be in the class and he enjoys it. So it's visual. I do a presentation, so it's not just me lecturing. It's actually a slideshow, and we go over the diseases of the heart, the 25 diseases of the heart as outlined in the text by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Purification of the Heart. So that's the book that we're basing it off of, but I try to make it visual so that the youth can stay engaged. But alhamdulillah, so far the feedback has been positive, so inshallah. Yes, it's MCC East Bay. So another question I have is, how can you set aside daily time to reflect on one's emotions? That's a very good question. Well, we do have a concept in our tradition that is a very, it's a time of reflection that we should all be doing every day, and based on maybe your own schedule or availability or what's convenient for you, that can really be done any day. But I prefer to, at night when the house is quiet and everybody's kind of asleep, you start to do something which we call muhasaba, right? Where you evaluate your day and you look at what happened during that day. Did you have any, were there any squabbles that you had with someone? Were you annoyed by someone? Were you pleasantly surprised by someone? Were you, whatever you felt that day? You want to just take account of how you reacted in different situations, and even more importantly, first, because muhasabah is really about self-accounting. So first and foremost, you want to look at your worship, right? Did you pray on time? Did you do anything that you could have done better in terms of your worship? And then you move to your personal relationships and things that maybe you are reflecting over, conversations you had, misunderstandings, miscommunications, or positive moments, whatever, the good and the bad, and you reflect on that. And you reflect primarily on your reactions, right? Like, how did you compose yourself? How were you? What state were you in? Because it's always about that, inner lens, looking at your heart, looking at where your intentions were. Were you doing things, for the sake of Allah, or was it really about your ego when you said that thing that you said or did that thing that you did? Was it all, was it self-serving, or was it really to do something for someone else or for the greater, good, or for Allah? Like, what was it? And kind of just doing that real intense internal work to be honest with yourself, because what's the point if we're gonna delude ourselves to think that everything is fine and that we don't have work to do, or we shouldn't even question ourselves. This is a problem, because when I think about, for example, the Day of Judgment. The Day of Judgment is a day that one of the names of it is the day of surprises, because a lot of people show up assuming that they've done a lot of good, and they're kind of waiting for their reward. But it's not going to be the case, because their intentions weren't in the right place. And we have that, a lot of hadith that indicate this. The knowledgeable person who comes on the Day of Judgment thinking that he's getting all this reward, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds him that you gained all that knowledge so that people could say about you were so knowledgeable. Jaza'un wifaqa, you got the reward of what you wanted already. Or the martyr, right? The martyr who says he died for the sake of Allah, but he really just wanted the glory and fame of being a martyr, or the wealthy person who gives and they say it's for the sake of Allah, but it's really so that they can have that status amongst their peers or people of being so generous. So when we do things without checking our intentions, this is the danger. This is the risk, that we may, a'udhu billah, end up really in a bad state. So self-reflection, always questioning your intentions is a really big part of, again, the tazkiyah process. And that's an everyday exercise. Every day you should question your intentions. Every day. And then that will, fall, or you're, paying attention to your emotions and the range of your emotions and whether or not you were able to regulate yourself or not will naturally fall under that. Because if you're, didn't have a good day, let's say you exploded on your kids, if you're a parent, and you got really angry at someone and you said something. There's people, I know many people, mashallah, who are religious people, who are practicing their faith, but they have a hard time with anger management. And what that does is it leads to cursing, right? It leads to threatening language. How many households have been affected by people who, say really harsh things that are you can't take back, right? But it's because that regulation process, it's not activated. We need to be regulating our emotions, and you can't do that if you're not calling yourself into account. So very important to do that every single day. So if you can do it at night, after Isha, maybe before you sleep, a good time to reflect on yourself throughout the day. Or maybe you're a morning person, you're just knocked out at night, it's hard for you to think. I get that. So maybe when you wake up in the morning, you want to first be grateful for existence because you woke up in the morning, right? So express that gratitude to Allah, but then look back on your previous day and ask yourself, what did I do yesterday that I'm not very proud of? And what could I have done better? And that's how we take ourselves into account. Alhamdulillah. Modern mental health focuses on the self and find your own happiness. Yes, which can be borderline me. How can we work on our mental health? Very good. That's a great question, mashallah. I love that. And the Muslim, we know our tradition is the middle way. It's the path of balance. So anytime you go into extremes, whether it's with your words, your actions, or even your attitude, you have to pull back a little bit. If you start, like, let's say for example, zeal, zeal is a emotion that I very much relate to, because I know when you're starting off, like whether you're a convert or you're young and you're kind of getting into your deen, you go really strong, you get head first, you just want to dive into everything and get everything. But I remember when I was younger, and I did that, I did that, I wanted to do everything. What it did is I would actually snap back with my family, and I was like not very balanced in the way that I was doing things. Here I am thinking I want to be religious and I want to learn and I want to go to this event and I want to do all this stuff, but it came at the cost of me arguing a lot with my family members or my parents, and it was just like no balance in that perspective, right? Because if one thing is leading you to be an extreme in the other thing, then you've lost. You don't have it clear. You should look for compromise. So anytime you want to do something, if it's really self-serving, but there's someone else or other people are suffering because you're so focused on your own development, you want to step back and say, wait a second, I'm going to be asked about how I treated those in my family. And that's a big part of our purpose here is we serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we also have responsibilities. We have duties to the people in our lives. People have rights over us. So I can't just be nafsi and think only for myself at the expense of all these other people, because Allah will not be pleased with me. So it's kind of like, how does that make sense? Oh, I'm, you know what I mean? Like I'm thinking I'm becoming a better person, or I want to become a better person, but then I'm also forsaking other people and not fulfilling rights to other people, and I'm expecting I'm going to have tawfiq. It doesn't work that way. As a Muslim, you have to have a balanced view. So what you do is prioritize, and you say Allah first, right? Our parents, your family, if you have a husband, children, those come first. Extended family members who have rights over you, and etc. Right? So you have a very clear understanding of who has rights over you. And yes, your purpose and your development is very important, and we shouldn't undermine that or diminish that. But you have to be able to find pockets of time where you can do the work for yourself without, again, failing to meet the needs of other people that are in your, that you're responsible for. So it's really about a matter of time management, a matter of prioritization. And anytime, like I said, you go to the extreme where you're hurting people, you're pushing your way, just know that you're not on the mark. Question about anger. Some Muslims get angry when they see others do something un-Islamic. This is as if this anger is an obligation. That's a good question. Having anger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is good, but it shouldn't be targeted to individuals. We become angry when we see injustices. We are angered by transgressions, by sinful behavior, things that are really abhorrent, odious, just things are just not, there's no room for them in our faith. We it's to be repelled by that. If it makes you angry to see, for example, a news report about a drunk driver, you can become angry with that, right? But you're not channeling that anger to the individual themselves, right? So this is where we have to kind of pull back a little bit, because Allah is the one who judges the individual, right? The individuals in this world, whatever they're doing, we leave them to Allah. That's really the best thing for our hearts. So if your anger becomes personal and it starts, focusing on the individual themselves, then it's not really for the sake of Allah, right? It's you're becoming self-righteous, and you have to be careful of that, because self-righteousness is also a disease of the heart. So you could look at someone else who's doing something sinful, but if you're veiling your own self-righteousness or repulsion at that person under, oh, I'm so angry that they're doing that, you're not fooling anybody, right? Because you should actually wish for that person to be guided, like Allah guide that person. But as far as the act itself, sure, as they say, hate the sin, not the sinner, right? So I think a lot of people get it mixed up, and they end up, like I said, focusing on the individual. But having anger for an action or injustice or a sin, that's entirely fine, because whatever angers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should anger the believer, right? Okay, alhamdulillah. So are there any other questions? I think I got them all, right? Yeah, that's a repeat question, alhamdulillah. Okay. Yes, so, well, I do a lot of women's events, girls' events, alhamdulillah. But with this quarantine, it's kind of up in the air. I'm doing a lot more lives, and I'm invited by different organizations to do talks. So right now our programming is sort of really up in the air, but regularly at the MCC East Bay, I do have women's halaqas, alhamdulillah. So yeah. And I do coming of age talks to youth, which are for young girls. So, but that's usually private homes or schools that will invite me to do conversations with young girls about, just coming into from childhood into adolescence, what that means, all of the responsibilities. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so we're almost at the hour. So, Brother Arbaz, I'm gonna now leave it to you. If am I supposed to end it? Are you gonna come back on and say maybe a parting dua or words? What would you like me to do? Oh, Sister Mara, yeah, at this point I don't have anything online except for this Purification of the Heart class, which I think you should definitely look into if you have young girls. There's quite a few, mashallah, students on that. They enjoy it. So hopefully you can look into the MCC East Bay page and find out more details. Alhamdulillah. May Allah give you tawfiq, inshallah, for looking for your girls. That's great. Oh, you can also, I'm sorry, quickly, I should have mentioned it. There is the Rahma Foundation, which I know all of the people involved. It's an amazing organization. They do have online programs. You can look them up. It's the Rahma Foundation, RAHMAH, so with an H at the end of it. It's one word. Just do a search in Google, the Rahma Foundation.org or maybe .com, I can't remember. Check them out. It's an all-female run organization, but they have classes for youth. They have classes for all ages. Really wonderful group. So you'll benefit from that, inshallah. Wayaki. Thank you. Okay, so Brother Arbaz, let me know on chat or if you want me to come back. Oh, there you are. Or you were there, and then you went. Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for the message, Jose. That was very informative and very beneficial. And this live stream thing is interesting because it live streams into 10 different platforms. So it's interesting. So you start looking around and seeing, where are people commenting and trying to pull together questions. But alhamdulillah, we had a good audience and everyone was very engaged. So jazakallah khair for coming out and sharing your thoughts about emotional intelligence, which is a very important topic. And inshallah, we can continue this conversation in the future. May Allah bless you. May Allah bless all of us. And may Allah keep us all very emotionally intelligent, inshallah. All right. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum, everyone.